Regarding the general election in Germany in March 1933. 2024. Then Prince Imperial Adolf Hitler the Hohenzollern nominated himself for democratic election to a seat in parliament for the official poll with the Workers' Party, a partially union-based political organization he got involved with during the late 1920s. During the election campaign he became more and more prominent as a candidate for the party in the upcoming poll. The Workers' Party started wearing the Hitler the Hohenzollern Royal Family flag, first copyrighted to my royal family in 1923, on armbands as an election gimmick for the campaign. It was also considered support for Adolf's eventual coronation as monarch of Germany, as he was already confirmed successor to his cousin, with the same grandfather, former Kaiser Wilhelm II, who abdicated to him in November 1918. Prince Imperial Adolf was still trying to recover from being almost fatally wounded with a machine gun on the Western Front during World War I at the time. When he did start feeling well enough to move on, and designed the monogram and flag for copyright in 1923 with Wilhelm II's help, he was abducted from a bar in München whilst showing the new flag to some Jewish gay friends quietly in November 1923. He spent the next 13 months in a partially condemned prison at Landsberg, as the only inmate in the empty jail. He was never officially arrested in any way, or charged with any offense. He was just plain detained illegally for just over a year. They waited to see if he had a nervous breakdown back to a traumatized state similar to after he had multiple emergency surgeries on site after being machine-gunned on the Western Front. They refused to give him updates on the health and well-being of his friends who were shot in the incident that caused the flag he took into the bar, mainly frequented by homosexual men, to become stained with the blood of the victims of the shooting. It became known as the Blutfahne. They did give him what they called treats to cheer him up, like beer. But all the supposed treats were items in the bar during the shooting incident. They were really attempts to induce a nervous breakdown. Obviously, the shooting happening on the first occasion he took the new flag out to show somebody quietly at a public venue, after the copyright was processed in a patent office associated with his hideously evil biological cousin Albert Einstein, was not his fault in any way. Whilst he was listed as missing for 13 months, there was an attempt to overthrow the government of Germany by force. It was badly planned and didn't succeed, but there were military deployed, riots in the streets, and casualties of the attempt. Prince Imperial Adolf missed the entire putsch attempt. He was extremely lucky to be released unharmed after he was illegally detained. Prince Imperial Adolf went off becoming monarch after being filled in on the details of the coup attempt whilst he was missing. His focus eventually changed to politics, after he released his self-published novel about my royal family, mostly written in jail. It was an interesting attempt to piece together whys, wheres, motives, and outcomes from extremely difficult events in his royal family life. It was called Mein Kampf, My Struggles in English. It turned out to be a fantastic source of gap-filling information flowing back to him after people scanned the text. It became so useful that it was given away free to people as a gift during certain events and ceremonies, after a publishing company reprinted it with a professional edge. Nothing like what people get now though, which is over 80% rewritten adulterated fiction, that I own the copyright to. There is retardedly ridiculous publicly available information suggesting he seized power with the Nazi Workers' Party in the middle of bitter winter in Germany in January 1933, as if by some force or non-democratic means. Some of it suggests elderly German president and relative of mine via my Habsburg Royal Family Paul von Hindenburg was forced to make him Chancellor that month. What a load of retarded garbage. A person cannot become Chancellor of Germany unless elected to a seat in Parliament first, then nominated for Chancellor and elected by the parliamentary seat holders, by constitutional law. That is the way it is supposed to work anyway. In January 1933, Prince Imperial Adolf Hitler the Hohenzollern had not even run for election yet. He didn't have a seat in Parliament at the time, he was elected in the general election in March 1933. He was not expecting anything but a comfy backbench type deal, maybe a minor ministerial role of some type. He enjoyed the celebrations, he thought all the speeches and that sort of thing were over, and he would recede into a minor government role. Adolf was seen making campaign speeches late in the election build-up, where people could clearly see him making exaggerated arm gestures that said, in screaming obvious body language, that after the election is over I won't have to make speeches like this anymore. New Member of Parliament Prince Imperial Adolf Hitler the Hohenzollern was seen celebrating his election victory with his older ineligible brother, and by then hero, Ernst Röhm, the stolen at birth twin of deceased Prince Edmund Hitler the Hohenzollern, who was murdered aged 11 in 1897. There were photographs. Adolf waved at a crowd from a window after the election during the celebrations. Then stepped aside and tried to get physiotherapy exercises to keep his old WW1-caused injuries flexible so he didn't seize up. People have made up all sorts of bizarre rubbish about the footage of him getting a few exercises in, because he didn't get a chance to do them earlier that day. My royal family's original Reichstag building was designed to be the palace residence for Adolf's father Prince Alois Hitler the Hohenzollern. It had an apartment for him included. When it was completed, the family didn't bother moving in, already settled in royal property elsewhere for years. People must have started pretending Adolf sobbed himself to sleep about it or something. When he went into the Reichstag for post-election victory celebrations and photographs, the lunatics went berserk. They burnt it down shortly afterwards in a small, self-contained arson riot, and said it was because he went in there for celebration images. He attended Parliament and was nominated for election by MPs as Chancellor of Germany. Laughed it off and was then elected political head of state by a whopping huge margin and asked to deliver an acceptance speech. He ad-libbed it as if he was going to decline, somehow. But was genuinely honored. He made a lot more politically themed speeches afterwards. Ernst Röhm was horribly murdered in 1934, and Adolf never recovered from the incident, including identifying his body. It was an abhorrently evil and hideous criminal act by the perpetrators. It was also a catalyst for a desperately needed security crackdown in Germany, promised during the election, to begin being carried out with much more urgency. It resulted in the rightful detention and trial of psycho criminals from all over Europe, running semi-wild through Germany regularly. Thousands of maximum security inmates were the result. In some ways Germany was semi-dreamy afterwards to some. Hard work had paid off. All the abhorrent psychos the neo-Nazis busted out of jail in December 1943, when they established themselves by name, were who were detained legally during the crackdown. They were like Anthony Hopkins in The Silence of the Lambs when detained for trial in a lot of cases. Like him depicted listening to classical music and doing drawings. They used their own hairbrushes, had their own gramophones and records, painted, drew pictures, sung occasionally, wore their own clothing, did their own makeup, were allowed to contact friends and family for personal belongings before trial, etc. Horrid. Then traditional, full-on maximum security prisoners after guilty verdicts that foreign countries refused to take back to serve their sentences. Inmates for real afterwards with all that gone. But treated humanely. Adolf was abducted in December 1943 by the group that established themselves by name as the neo-Nazis that month from a hotel dinner in Berlin hosted by Albert Einstein's lunatic sister, Sadie. In the 1990s after Re-Unification, the Supreme Court of Germany ordered the Reichstag rebuilt especially for me. As a royal family-owned building that was demolished unnecessarily after World War II, despite being in a repairable state. The ruling was that all imperial properties I own of that type that were demolished when in a repairable state would have to be rebuilt at taxpayers' expense for me. The court ruling in Germany had my name on it. My name was chanted during the hearings. When my new Reichstag was complete, whatever it really is, they added a thing called an on a wall. It contains post office box-like boxes or something like that with the name of every Chancellor of Germany on one each. With years served as Chancellor. They left Adolf's boxes blank, using the excuse that they were not sure what they were actually supposed to say exactly. Even though he was a massive success for the good as Chancellor between March 1933 and his abduction in December 1943. He was one of only around a dozen members of parliament to survive the neo-Nazis mass murder of MPs that month. They still have a bizarrely large collection of photographs of the mass graves the MPs were dumped in. The neo-Nazis moved on to taking every maximum security jail they could at gunpoint. It caused the escape of thousands of criminal psychotics when they did. Those lunatics quickly killed most, but not all, of the original neo-Nazis who busted them out of jail in December 1943 and then immediately committed a heinously large mass genocide of literally tens of millions in the next few months, themed around labeled groups. So, the past chancellors on a wall boxes. Adolf has two there. They got that bit correct, so they didn't have no idea at all what to write. Box 1 should say, His Imperial Highness Prince Imperial Adolf Hitler the Hohenzollern, Chancellor between his election in March 1933 to January 17, 1940. Box 2 should say, His Imperial Majesty Kaiser Adolf Hitler the Hohenzollern, Chancellor between his coronation on January 18, 1940 to his abduction in December 1943. Then there should be a blank box memorializing no Chancellor until the fresh elections, which I assume were after disunification, into a map of Sadie Einstein breastfeeding her inbred baby in 1949 that she really self-aborted in April 1944 at 3 months gestated and didn't exist. It is extremely offensive that his boxes are blank. Particularly given what he was put through. He escaped prisoner of war jail in Yugoslavia in late 1959, around November. Around 648 seats were contested in the 1933 election, where my great-grandfather Adolf won his seat, that led to him becoming a sensational chancellor. If the same number of seats in parliament were occupied via election in December 1943, then the terrorism group that established itself by name that month, the neo-Nazis, mass murdered around 636 members of parliament that month, December 1943. Those responsible were heinously evil. I cannot tell you how many survived the escaped maximum security prison psychos cull of the original neo-Nazis so they could take over for what we all know happened after. Kaiser Adolf Hitler the Hohenzollern did not regain full consciousness in jail until deep into January 1944. Where he was told Sadie was pregnant to his stolen sperm with a deliberately inbred child they were going to pretend to take over my royal family with. As if it was his only hope for an heir and successor. By the end of January 1944, the escaped prison lifer psychos-led neo-Nazis had mass murdered millions. My biological great-grandmother Janet Podolsky was offered a job pretending to be a fictitious character called Eva Braun by the neo-Nazis around then. Her daughter to Kaiser Adolf's stolen sperm born 1907, Donna Podolsky, my grandmother, had divorced my grandfather Iosif Stalin Jugashvili around 2 years earlier. Their only legitimate child together was my mother, Judith. The marriage left my grandfather a quadriplegic by the time my mother was born in January 1940, 12 days before Adolf was finally officially made Kaiser of Germany. Bit of Podolsky Game of Thrones stuff there. As a relative of both Kaiser Adolf and Paul von Hindenburg, who died in 1934, I have ancestral memories of them shaking hands publicly after Adolf was elected Chancellor of Germany by incumbent MPs. There is a well-known photograph of the handshake, probably extensively tampered with. The look on Hermann Göring's face in the background is really very funny. Göring is Webb in German.